welcome to CriminaliTy. I wanted to put this video together to create a timeline of everything that we know about the Gannon Stauch case as the trial of his stepmother, Leticia, T, she goes by all of them, as it's coming soon, as jury selection starts on March 20th, and the trial is set to start on April 3rd. So I wanted to get this video together so that you guys, if you need a refresher or if you're new to the Gannon Stauch case, that you have all the information in one spot. So, here we go. Gannon was born on September 29, 2008 in Loris, South Carolina, to Landon Hyatt and Al Stauch, who had been in the National Guard since 2005. Gannon was premature but showed his fighting spirit and grew into a vivacious toddler. He loved having a baby sister and would try to help his mom care for her. Al and Landon tried to make their relationship work for their kids, but ultimately they divorced and Landon married Mike, which she had another daughter with, and Al married Leticia, also known as T and Tisha, and she had a teenage daughter, Harley, from a previous marriage. At the end of 2018, Al and Leticia moved to Lorson Ranch, a community in Colorado Springs, Colorado. When Landon was pregnant with her third child, she was hospitalized with complications, and she and Al decided it was best for Gannon and Lena to live with Al and spend holidays and vacations with Landon and family in South Carolina. On Saturday, January 25th, 2020, Al drove to Denver to stay at a hotel to catch an early flight Sunday morning to Oklahoma. And on that Sunday, Leticia took Gannon and Lena to the Garden of the Gods, a popular natural landmark that's nestled at the foot of Pikes Peak on the west side of Colorado Springs. It's known for its massive red rocks that stick straight out of the ground and draws in tourists from all over the country. While at the Garden of the Gods, they traveled around and looked at all the different landmarks and seemed to enjoy their day from pictures that we were shown. And Gannon was texting one of his friends and planning a sleepover and just doing, what 11-year-old boys do. And on their way home, they stop and pick up Burger King and, just a very average, normal evening. By that night, Gannon was suffering from a stomachache, according to Leticia, who then contacts Al via text message to let him know that Gannon has been up most of Sunday night with a stomachache. So Monday morning comes and Gannon has to stay home from school due to his stomach issues, but Leticia is supposed to be at work. So she comes up with the plan that she's going to call into work and tell them her stepfather was hit by a car and killed. So if you're somebody who likes to keep track of lies, we can count this as confirmed lie number 1. Her stepfather was not killed or hit by a vehicle at all. So now it's Monday, January 27th, 2020. Leticia has called out to work because of her stepfather, and Gannon is staying home sick from school due to his stomachache. And Leticia decides to take a couple pictures of Gannon laying in bed and sends them to Al to let him know that Gannon is sick and he's going to be staying home for the day. All seems to kind of be normal at this point from an outside perspective. And then the day progresses. That evening at 6:55, Leticia calls 911 and reports Gannon missing and says that he left to play with his friend and never came home. So they think that this is now a runaway, or this is what's being portrayed to them, is that now Gannon has run away from home. And 911 advises Leticia to contact the non-emergency line, which Leticia does and says that at 3:15, Gannon went to play with his friends down the street and never returned. At 7:32 p.m., Gannon is entered into the national and state databases for runaway children. At 10:09 p.m., officers finally arrive at the Stauch residence to search for Gannon, who they are unable to locate, and the investigation into what could have potentially happened to Gannon begins.
Mommy and Daddy's here. We're begging and pleading for you to come home.
After receiving the news that Gannon was missing and potentially had run away from home, Landon hopped on a plane from South Carolina, and Al immediately flew home from Oklahoma to search for their 11-year-old son. Law enforcement began to canvass the neighborhood going door to door to see if anybody had heard from Gannon or seen him anywhere at all. They asked neighbors to check their surveillance cameras and Ring doorbell cameras, just looking for any sign of Gannon. As the neighborhood caught wind that Gannon was missing, the neighbors came out in droves to help search. The Lorson Ranch community turned their neighborhood entirely blue. It was Gannon's favorite color, in the hopes that Gannon would know he was loved as they continued to search for him and pray for him and his parents and his sisters and all the people who loved him. So there was a couple glimmers of hope as one of the neighbors had seen on surveillance a little boy who was matching the description of Gannon when he went missing. Another one was that Leticia was telling her friends that, and social media, that Gannon had been spotted at a local come-and-go gas station getting into a vehicle. Unfortunately, neither one came to fruition, and neither were Gannon. Gannon's family took to social media in the hopes that they would bring some attention and possibly some leads to Gannon's whereabouts. And this actually included Leticia. We'll get into some of the things that she did on social media in just a bit. But first, on January 28th, 2020, which is the day after Gannon had gone missing, there's already a whole bunch that's happening that day. As in the early hours of the 28th, Leticia decided to rent a vehicle to pick up Al from the airport instead of driving her typical vehicle, which was a Volkswagen Tiguan, which is like a SUV. She decided she was going to rent a Kia, and then she asks Harley to put her car, which is a white Jetta, into the garage where the Tiguan was normally parked. Al would later comment that he actually never saw the Tiguan again. So far at this point, Leticia's keeping to her story that Gannon left about 3:15, 3:30 to go down the street to play with his friends, and he never came home. She's talking to her friends, texting her friends, telling them basically the same story at this point. Now, what happens next is kind of interesting. She starts to get kind of sketchy in her actions and what she's talking about and who she's talking to. You know, she's messaging Al that she thinks that the FBI or that the police department is hiding something because they're asking for Gannon's toothbrush. And Al's like, what would they be hiding? Like, what are you talking about? But she's adamant that something's off. And so by the night of the 28th, which remember, he's only been missing for a little over a day at this point, she's texting the investigators, like, what do you want from me? I have nothing to give you. She claims like there's a leak in the police department and that the El Paso Blue is telling her, you know, this inside information and that she didn't do anything wrong, that she's not allowed to go home and sleep, and yet her daughter Harley is there and they're not letting her leave. It's all very dramatic, and the officer simply responds with, I would just like you to come in and talk to me so we can get information on finding Gannon. Things get even stranger, or the messages get even stranger at this point, because Leticia starts messaging the investigator things like, when we came back in, that, you know, there was smoke, it was smoky, and when we came back in the house after trying to air it out, we had blood on us, and answering for things that nobody's even asked about at this point, or potentially even knows about. What we did know was that on Sunday night, Gannon had supposedly knocked over a candle that potentially had burned the carpet, and he was worried and scared that he was going to be in trouble by his dad. She just keeps messaging the investigator that they don't understand how hard it is to be a step-parent or a stepmom. Ultimately, Leticia does decide that she's going to set up an appointment to come in and talk with the officers about Gannon's disappearance, so she schedules it for January 29th at 10 a.m. She does not show up. Well, she does. She's just a couple hours late. She finally shows up around noon. And when she gets there, the officers realize that her Volkswagen is wet, like it had been to a car wash. Leticia sits down with officers, but her story completely changes. And now she states that on Sunday, Gannon had knocked over a candle, which burned the carpet. and she drove around the neighborhood to a residential construction area that was taking place and met a Hispanic man named Eduardo. She asked him if he would repair the carpet in her home, which he agreed to do. She then gave him the code to the garage door after agreeing that he would repair the carpet the following day while she was shopping. On Monday, she arrived home at approximately 2:30 p.m. She disarmed her security system and went to the basement. Eduardo was in the basement and attacked her and pointed a gun at her. Eduardo allowed her to go upstairs to greet Lena when she was coming home from school, who she sent outside to play. And Lena is seen on security cameras of the neighbors riding her bicycle at approximately this time. Leticia then states that she returned to the basement where Eduardo ended up sexually assaulting her for over an hour. She believed that she may have hit her head and blacked out, although the officers saw no visible signs of injury on her head. During the attack, Gannon jumped on Eduardo's back, who then threw Gannon across the room, and after Eduardo had finished sexually assaulting her, he pointed the gun at Gannon and demanded a suitcase. Leticia gives Eduardo a brown suitcase and a cardboard box, but he didn't ask for the cardboard box apparently. Eduardo attempts to sexually assault her again, but she hits her head and blacks out. She states that Eduardo took Gannon when he left. She says she tries to clean up the area, including Gannon's room and the utility room. So she does all this cleaning up, but yet she still refuses to have a sexual assault kit performed so that the officers can find a possible DNA sample in order to catch Eduardo and find Gannon. So throughout the interview, Leticia denies hurting or killing Gannon, but comes up with excuses on why there would be blood in and on her vehicle or why there would be blood in Gannon's room. Towards the end of the interview, Leticia wanted to leave, but police detained her in order to seize her phone and obtain a DNA sample. Leticia began stuffing tissues in her pants and said she was having chest pain as well as shortness of breath. Now, why Leticia was stuffing tissues down her pants, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. My assumption would be she was trying to do something that would make it so a sexual assault kit could not be performed. But who knows? Police requested medical assistance and the ambulance arrived and Leticia was transported to the hospital. Leticia answered questions from the medical personnel at the police station, but went silent when she was in the ambulance. She was treated and signed herself out of the hospital prior to all of the tests being completed. She made a call from the waiting room and was picked up by an unknown individual who ended up taking her to meet Harley, who was only about a mile away. So while Leticia goes off with Harley, they obtain a rented 2020 Nissan Altima, and the officers are left with her Volkswagen and her phone. Luckily, the officers were able to put a tracker on the rented Nissan Altima to track her movement, and this is when the processing of this evidence begins. In the case of Gannon Stauch, who was originally suspected to have run away, is now changed to a missing and endangered child. Once Leticia's phone data was downloaded, it was found that she had done multiple searches that indicated she was not happy in her marriage and not happy being a step-parent. Searches such as, "I feel like a nanny, not a stepmom. My husband uses me to babysit his kids. I sent my husband sexual messages and he ignores them. How do I make my husband want me more?" And then plans to actually get away. Are there any free money ways to move away from a bad situation? Looking to find a new husband. Looking for a military single without kids. She also does searches in reference to Landon, like, "It's crappy some parents don't care for their kids or buy them presents." Or parents are those who put their kids before their nails. "I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is going to send me a Valentine's Day card since I raise her kids." Just by her Google searches, you could almost feel the frustration that Leticia has for not only Al, but for Landon and the children. It's palpable. The downloaded data also shows searches from that Sunday night where she's searching things like, "My son burned the carpet, how do I fix it?" Or, "Will a humidifier help if exposed to smoke?" Searches that confirm that a candle was most likely knocked over somehow, some way. During this download, there's also a video that ends up being leaked to social media of Sunday night with Leticia reprimanding Gannon. Now, this video is hard to listen to, so it's about 50 seconds. If you can hang through it, please do. It's important to the case. If you can't, I completely understand.
Well, devastating. Initially, Scott, I can't lie when the TMZ information...
Gannon, I promise this is the last time I'm going to ask you. I'm just freaked out, okay? Are you sure you didn't do it on purpose?
He did it.
Okay, we promise. He promised.
On purpose.
Pinky promise.
Pinky.
Okay, alright, so, listen. We're going to have to sell stuff to fix it, okay? So, we figure out what we got to sell. We can sell the sofa. We can sell whatever. Because we got to get it fixed, so lady, don't be mad at us and kick us out of the house. Okay? You got it?
Since this video was leaked to social media, there was quite a few people who were trying to screen record it before it was taken down. So there are a few different versions out there. And the channel Plunder, if you're not familiar with her, I'm going to link her channel in the description of this video. But she actually has a video that's a little bit longer. And at the very end of it, you can hear Gannon say, "I'm bleeding."
You got it?
Law enforcement was also able to download the data from the Volkswagen, which showed that on January 28th, Leticia had taken the Volkswagen to the Colorado Springs airport where she parked it, because remember, she had rented another vehicle at that time. So she parked it there, and it is picked up at approximately 7 o'clock that evening. Leticia proceeds to turn her cell phone off and disconnects it from the network. The Tiguan is seen at a King Soopers parking lot on their surveillance footage at approximately 8 p.m. The electronic system of the vehicle then was reported to have been in northwest Colorado Springs, which is north of the Air Force Academy in Douglas County. And per the system, the vehicle was at Highway 105 and Perry Park Road in Douglas County. This becomes important to officers who go straight there and start investigating why Leticia would have been there with her phone off that night. The officers do find a piece of particle board that has a substance that resembles blood, and after testing it, it does match Gannon. And Harley leaves the Stauch residence at approximately 10:26 p.m. and she heads to the area where the cross streets of Powers and Carefree are. It is noted that the rental vehicle, the Kia that she had rented on the 28th, is returned at approximately 9 a.m., where Harley ends up picking her up from the airport. This is directly prior to the interview Leticia was supposed to be at 10 a.m. at the police department that she ended up being 2 hours late for. So one would infer that Harley meets up with Leticia on the night of the 28th. They leave the Volkswagen somewhere and go together so that Leticia could return the Kia the next morning, where Harley picks her up at the airport. There are a few other searches that are done on the phone which show things like what happens when my son runs away, or the process to find our runaway child. She also searches, can Nintendo find my Switch? There are some other searches that are done on the 27th during the day before Gannon is reported missing, one of which is from Gannon's phone. Can my parent find my cell phone if it is off? Which many people believe was Leticia using Gannon's phone in a somewhat of a premeditated way to see if she should discard of the phone that day. We won't know until trial, obviously, what the intent was, if there was one. Law enforcement executed search warrants throughout the Stauch residence, ultimately finding positive Blue Star results in Gannon's bedroom, in the garage, and other areas of the house, such as the utility room and the hallway from Gannon's room, the staircase leading from the lower level to the top level, and the pathway to the garage from the stairs. There was also a pair of size 8.5 Nike shoes that contained blood and were confirmed to be Leticia's. In Gannon's room, though, one corner had blood that had seeped through the carpet into the pad and stained the concrete underneath. Blood spatter was located on the walls, over 50 droplets. Gannon's mattress contained a red stain that was consistent with blood in the same area the carpet was saturated. All of this was consistent with where Gannon's head and torso would have been. And blood residue was found on the baseboard and the electrical outlet next to his bed. So they process all of this evidence, and the next big thing that comes out is a neighbor comes forward who has been going through his surveillance footage from his security cameras, and he actually sees Leticia leaving the house on the morning of the 27th at 10:16 a.m. in Al's truck. You can clearly see Gannon going to the vehicle, or he drops something that he's unable to pick up himself, and they get in the car and they leave. They don't return until 2:19 p.m. that afternoon. So the question is, where did they go that day? According to Leticia, they went and ran errands. They did things like they went to Petco, which is confirmed by an employee. And oddly enough, she actually goes into Petco twice. Gannon is not seen on that surveillance, and per Leticia's mom on social media, she states that Gannon actually stayed in the car. But the Petco she chose to go to was about 40 minutes away from their home. The employee notes in their social media post that Leticia was acting odd and kept going to the front door of the store to look out. But the second time, that is not actually noted by the employee that saw her at the store. The other thing she says they went to do was to go buy a bike for Al, and they were going to sell some of the Gannon sports stuff or buy new sports stuff at like a Play It Again sports store, and just running errands. During this trip of running errands, there's actually a text from Gannon's phone to Harley's phone that says that Tisha left her phone at home, so if Harley needs her, to text Gannon. There's a couple texts exchanged between Gannon's phone and Al, where Gannon is asking if he can play Zelda, and Al is saying, "Not today, buddy." This is also when the search takes place, where Gannon says, "Can my parents find my phone if it is off?" So this video actually caused a lot of controversy on social media, as many people still today do not believe that Gannon ever got out of this truck. Another piece of evidence that's processed is actually the ADT security system, which shows when the doors are opened and closed. This actually throws Leticia's story right out the door of having somebody who was in the basement attacking her and Gannon, because the ADT is actually registering the doors being open to the back of the house, throughout the house, this entire time that she would have been being attacked and potentially blacked out. And during this time, Harley actually arrives home from work and picks up Lena, and Leticia ends up texting Harley requesting carpet powder, trash bags, baking soda, things that Leticia was ultimately going to use to clean up. Things that Harley ends up purchasing at a Dollar General. So on Thursday, January 30th, 2020, Leticia and Harley are out shopping for clothes because, according to Leticia, they can't get into their home to get their belongings, so they need to buy new clothes. While they're out shopping, law enforcement actually approaches them and ends up taking Harley's white Jetta to process for evidence. They are seen again on January 31st, where Leticia, Harley, Leticia's aunt, and an unknown male are seen leaving the Stauch residence with a rented moving van. And Leticia spots a news crew and decides to stop and do an interview.
I am Tisha Stauch, which is Gannon's stepmother.
You've been a part of the investigation since the very first time. You were the last person to see him. Is that right?
Correct.
What did you see when you last saw him?
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about anything with the case. I would more so be willing to talk about how the community needs to have faith and continue to work together and not make these false accusations, like the things that have been said that I've disappeared from the community. I haven't been there to help, but there's lots of reasons behind that.
Reasons like death threats, right?
Right. Death threats are one of them. My family's getting lots of death threats. We counted over 20 some. death threats already. 2, my husband's ex-wife is living in our home, and of course I'm not coming home to do these things and to help with the family when I was kind of like told I couldn't. And then many other things that happened with the El Paso County Police Department, you know, and in doing the investigation I was told I wasn't complying. And could I elaborate on that?
Please do.
Yes, so I asked for an attorney during the interview, and I was denied that by them. I was held because they were blocking the door, and I was told I couldn't leave, and that if I would have touched them, they would have probably, you know, said I still wasn't complying, or said I was, you know, trying to run away or something. But during the interview, I asked several times, could I stop the interview? Could I get an attorney? Could I stop the interview? Could I get an attorney? I was denied. I was told I couldn't get nothing to drink. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I mean, it was continuously that my constitutional rights were violated.
And that's why you say that they said then you weren't cooperating with the investigation.
That's why they said I wasn't cooperating at that time, correct.
And why did you ask for an attorney at the time?
Well, I asked for an attorney at the time because there was one individual, there was 2 really good detectives, and so I'm not, you know, going to talk bad about detectives, but the tactics they started to get when I would answer questions, they try to, you know, they're detectives, they're supposed to twist. The one main goal is to find Gannon. But during that time, some of those things made me feel uncomfortable the way they were saying things, so I immediately stopped and felt like an attorney would help me with some of the vocabulary and things like that I needed help with, and understanding some of the things that they were asking.
I'm going to shift gears to what has become a huge online presence of people obviously trying to do the right thing, help find Gannon. But at the same time, sometimes it just feels like rumor mongering. Have you seen any of those comments yourself?
We have, and see, that's one of the main things we haven't been around in the public eye, because I didn't want to expose my family to it if all these things were going on. You know, there was comments about Gannon getting pushed off the hike, and there was comments about this, and that's just not true. I took care of Gannon for the last 2 years in our home because his mother didn't want to do it. And I would never, ever hurt this child. And I know there's some questions out there about, okay, so tell me what happens. That's up to the investigations when they end up letting you guys know, but I've cooperated with them, even to the point that we were held with a gun, and my daughter, a 17-year-old who serves our country in the United States Air Force, who has never committed a crime or done anything wrong in her life, was put in handcuffs over the keys that was in her purse so they could take her car.
And they weren't in there?
They weren't even in her car, I mean in her purse.
And
they were in my pocket.
You originally didn't even know it was the law enforcement officers?
I didn't know it was a law enforcement officer because when he came out, I guess he was putting his jacket on, and it wasn't necessarily his fault. He was adjusting and happened to catch me. But I saw the gun and I panicked originally and kind of thought, oh gosh, I got to, like, who's this guy? And then once I realized it was the sheriff's office, I was totally okay, but they still had a gun and told me they were going to shoot me. But I was really concerned about my daughter, asking why she was being detained in handcuffs and things like that, when that shouldn't even happen for a child. That shouldn't happen for someone who was standing inside of a store shopping, because we couldn't have any clothes because all of our clothes were here. If we came here and got clothes, you know, we would be harassed. So she went to purchase some underwear and things like that and was put in the handcuffs in the store, you know, and then brought out with men with guns. And that's just not okay. You know, they could have approached me and said, hi, I'm with El Paso County, can I please get this, instead of the way that it happened.
I should try and clarify here, not necessarily crime rates, but the way that people are reacting online to rumors about you with the source.
Oh yes, wow. The rumors have gotten so bad. I pretty much have been told at least 10 different ways that these people have these conspiracy theories. I guess they watch a lot of law shows and maybe they have all these theories on how Gannon is dead, and that's what they're saying. So I'm like, why are you saying Gannon is dead? He is not dead. We are going to find Gannon. And that's the main goal that we all have, my family has. Just because you haven't seen us, we have that same goal. We've been out searching. My aunt has been out searching. My family has been out searching. We all have been doing that together so that we can protect each other.
How does it feel when not only you have a lost child who you are in care of, but then people blaming you for that child not being there?
You know, I'm just ready for Gannon to come home. Most importantly, for him to see his family. But second, I am going to be so ecstatic when I'm able to say to people that I hope they have a really sincere apology for all these theories that have came out online, for all the things they said that I have done.
It's just such an odd interview. But anyways, the rented Nissan Altima is also seen in this parade of vehicles leaving the Stauch residence. And since the Nissan Altima still has the police tracker attached to it, Leticia is actually tracked back to the area of Highway 105 and South Perry Park Road, where the piece of particle board was later found. At this point, it's known that Leticia, Harley, and the others that were with them on the 31st then start to head towards the East Coast and are no longer in Colorado. It's unknown if the police actually knew that at this time. Leticia's stories continue to evolve based on evidence that she's approached with or questions that she's asked about Gannon's disappearance. After what seemed to be some email exchanges between Al and Tisha, Al's begging her for information and trying to get her to help him find Gannon, when Al approaches Leticia about the evidence located at Palmer Lake, her answer is that Gannon wanted to ride his bike, so they decided to go to that area where he would be able to ride his bike, and he fell off the bike and hurt himself. She also states that it must have just been a piece of wood that, flew out the back of the truck. Her next big story, though, is that she tells Al that Gannon was riding his bike near the Highway 105 and fell and hit his head. And then Quincy Brown abducted Gannon from that location. And Quincy was being driven around by a man named Terrence. Interestingly, Quincy Brown was recently on the news for being one of Colorado's most wanted felons. Leticia decides to tell Al that the story about Gannon falling off the bike was a lie, and that she only said it because she thought that's what he wanted to hear. Leticia then changes the story to that Quincy Brown was actually the one who had sexually assaulted her and abducted Gannon. She states that Quincy followed her home from the Petco and was laying in the middle of the road in front of her car, which forced Leticia to stop to avoid hitting him. He then jumped in her vehicle and forced her to take him home. Leticia tells her friends that she's lying to Al because he won't believe her anyway, and that she's planning on flying back to Colorado to take a lie detector test to prove that she didn't do anything to hurt Gannon. So Leticia doesn't actually return to Colorado. What she does is uses a website called fakepolygraph.com, where she answers questions such as, did you have any participation in hurting your stepson? What ends up happening, though, is that the website will not release these results, these fake polygraph results, to Leticia. So she contacts them upset because she paid for them to prove her innocence. So remember earlier I said we'd get to Leticia's crazy social media posts. Throughout the entire case, Leticia was taking to Facebook and social media platforms and posting novels about her innocence and pushing a lot of narrative about what a bad parent Landon was and trying to convince people that Gannon was into some form of drug called bath salts. Most people did not believe her, and many people on social media started to fight with her, and she fought back. So she ended up creating a Facebook group for herself under a fake account where people could join to support Tisha. And under this fake account, she actually pretends to be friends with Tisha and Landon at one point. She interacts with the group members and in private messages and tells them that Tisha's actually pregnant. So if you're one of those that was counting how many lies that Leticia tells, you're going to have to fill me in the comment section because I actually have lost track at this point. Her mother, Deborah Locklear, stayed in the Facebook groups and continued to interact with the group members. Some actually speculated that Tisha was actually using her mom's account. So earlier in the video, I talked about that Leticia, Harley, Leticia's aunt, and the unknown male all departed Colorado Springs on approximately January 31st, February 1st of 2020, and they started to head east. We learned that Leticia and Harley, once they leave the Stauch residence, they do the interview with Spencer, and we know that she makes another stop at Highway 105 and Perry Park Road. And they continue on to Pace, Florida, where they stay at this hotel for a couple of hours before heading on to Orlando, where Leticia posts about going to the Daytona 500. Ultimately, they leave Orlando and they end up back in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where she would be arrested in Horry County on March 2nd for charges of first-degree murder of a child under 12 by a person of trust, and child abuse resulting in death, tampering with a deceased body, and tampering with physical evidence. Leticia then heads to court on March 3rd for her extradition hearing, where she's basically told, you can go back or you can fight, and if you fight, you have to be able to prove that you're not who you say they are and that you're not the person that they want for these crimes.
So my question to you is, do you want to waive extradition or do you want to fight extradition?
Well, I've still never been given the opportunity, like, since the beginning, to even call my attorney to even talk to him about any of these things.
Well, where's your attorney?
I need to call my friend Laura, who has the attorney, but I was told yesterday that someone was going to do that, but they never did. I've asked since yesterday that I call an attorney.
Well, it doesn't matter either way to me. I'm just asking the question. I don't care what the answers are. It's just a hearing where they have to prove you are who you are and that you're wanted for a felony. Those are the two things they have to prove in an extradition hearing.
In the end, she waives extradition and returns to Colorado. While being transported back to Colorado, Leticia actually slips out of her handcuffs and attacks the deputy. It was reported that the deputy actually had to get medical assistance. I don't believe that she's facing any charges in Kansas for that, though. They arrive back in El Paso County on Thursday, March 5th, 2020, and on that same day, Al filed for divorce.
Leticia Stauch.
Leticia had her next advisory hearing on March 11th, where she did her best to hide behind her attorney so the camera couldn't catch her. Also in the courtroom were Gannon's parents, Landon and Al, who were visibly upset. On Tuesday, March 17th of 2020, a construction crew was working near the Escambia Bridge in Pace, Florida, which is only a few miles from the hotel that Leticia and Harley only stayed a few hours at back at the beginning of February. Under the Escambia Bridge, the construction workers located a brown suitcase, and inside of the suitcase was the remains of a child. On Wednesday, March 18th, the El Paso County Sheriff's Office was contacted by the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office, stating that they responded to a call of a deceased juvenile male in Pace, Florida. An autopsy was being performed by their medical examiner, and the deceased juvenile was tentatively identified as Gannon Stauch.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Allen. I'm the Senior Deputy District Attorney prosecuting the Leticia Stauch case. I do know that I speak for everyone who's been involved in this case when I say that our hearts are with Gannon's family and his friends. Ever since news broke that Gannon's body was found in Florida, we've been inundated with inquiries from the press and the public. Today I filed new formal charges in the case against Leticia Stauch. Those charges are murder in the first degree after deliberation, a Class 1 felony that carries a potential prison sentence of life in prison without parole. In addition to that, I've filed 8 counts of crime of violence for the alleged use of a firearm, a blunt instrument, a knife or other sharp object, and for causing the death of Gannon Stauch. These new charges are added to the original 4 charges that we originally filed in this case. Keep in mind, these are merely allegations. All defendants are presumed innocent until and unless they are proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Leticia continued to deny her involvement in Gannon's death. During the beginning of her incarceration, she was exchanging letters with YouTubers where she would sign them with different names. One, she claimed that she was a vampire in training, but she continued to deny any involvement in Gannon's death and believed that she was going to be exonerated at one point. And through her court appearances, her attorneys would file competency evaluations, and at one point Leticia tried to represent herself, was unable to do so, and so she was reassigned new attorneys. They requested sanity evaluations, and in the first one, she failed to cooperate.
I saw Ms. McKinney a minute ago. Okay. All right. We're here for a status conference to see what's going on second evaluation, competency evaluation for Ms. Stauch.
A lot of Leticia's hearings were done via WebEx due to the pandemic, and her second competency hearing was taking place, and Leticia was seen wandering around her cell, flipping on and off the lights and moaning. Many suspect that this is the setup for her insanity defense. Also, during her incarceration, she hatched a plan to escape. She had been passing letters to another inmate in the hopes that the inmate would help her obtain a broom, stating that she'd already measured herself and she knew she could use the broom. She knew she would fit through the window of her cell. She just wanted the inmate to think hard about helping her because her grandpa had put $75,000 in a bank account for an attorney, but she would much rather use it to survive, and that her and the inmate could use it to live on once they escaped. The inmate contacted the guards, and the guards interviewed her and confiscated the letters, and they went to Leticia's cell where they did what is called a shakedown and found another letter located inside of her cell to Harley, stating that if something was to come up on the news where she was no longer in jail, for Harley to not be afraid. Needless to say, this plan does not work. During her preliminary hearing, which she chose to not be present at, we learned that Gannon had been placed into the suitcase at least a month prior to being found. We learned that the Nissan Altima with the tracker was tracked to the Escambia Bridge at approximately 4:15 a.m. on February 4th, 2020, during the few hours they had stayed at the hotel in Pace, Florida nearby. We learned that Gannon's cause of death was blunt force trauma to his head, a gunshot wound to his jaw, and approximately 18 stab wounds, including to his hands, which showed to be defensive wounds. Leticia's current court status is that her trial begins on April 3rd. She does have a second sanity evaluation done where the Dr. Dorothy Lewis from the HBO Max special, Crazy Not Insane, is to be taking the stand to say that Leticia has dissociative identity disorder. Her current plea is that she is not guilty by reason of insanity, which ultimately is an affirmative defense, meaning she does know that she killed Gannon, but this claim states that she did it at a time where she was disassociating. Essentially, she did it, but was insane at the time. Will the jury believe her? I don't know.
Really, I'm not in the correct mindset to be even standing up here, but if I had to say one thing, that when he said Gannon is no longer with us, I'd have to say Gannon is with us. After the stories of people from all over the world, he's not only my hero now, he's the world's hero. So I think the community, the positive support from a state that I've never visited other than 2 or 3 times, I'm astounded by the amount of love that's not come from me. It's came from my boy. And never thought I'd be standing here. It was a nightmare. I've had to put trust in the people I don't know. Today, I got the worst news and the best news. Obviously, we know what the worst news is, but the best news is that justice will be served. And I'll make sure that justice is served because my boy did not deserve any of this that has happened to him. So I urge media one more time just to hold off on questions until we know that this person, the stepmom that I even trusted, that she will pay 100% for this heinous thing she done. And I know that that's going to will be done. So I ask you guys, I beg and plead if you've known, or if you see this story, all of you have seen this story, please hold that very close to you. Because I want to live this earth knowing that justice was served for my boy. And I know that you've seen pictures, you've seen stories, you've seen my little man. He is truly my hero. And I'm gladly giving that to you guys too, that he can be your hero. I've heard stories of people that have not prayed in years, that have finally fell on their knees to pray. And I know where my son's at, without a shadow of a doubt. So many families have been brought closer together because of this. I know my boy is special, and I've told my people and my family and friends that Gannon has a testimony, that Gannon has a story. He's special. And this is his story. So make that story magnificent, who my child is. And I'm putting my trust into you guys to do that. So thank you for allowing Gannon to be your hero and sharing him with us.
My soul, a soul which I have given over to God long ago. I come before you today a broken man, celebrating the life of my precious, premature, and prepossessing son, whose story and legacy have captivated this community and parts of this country. Every parent wishes for their children to be successful, making their mark on this world in life or in death. Unfortunately, my sons came in the form of the latter. Gannon leaves a legacy of unity and togetherness. Just look around at everyone in this room. Read the social media responses from around the country and observe how unified the community was and is when his name is mentioned. It really did not truly hit me until I had to move out of my Lorson Ranch home, look back east through the sea of fog, and saw the sea of blue lights from the Lorson Ranch neighborhood permeating through the fog. As much as those lights and that scene was for my son, that was because of my son.
First, I would like to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. But most importantly, I really want to thank you guys for caring about Gannon. And as much as this video talks about the story of what happened to Gannon, I want to make sure that each of us remembers Gannon for who he was and not for what Leticia Stauch did. Thank you again for watching, and more importantly, caring about these children. Please keep Landon and Al and all of Gannon's loved ones in your thoughts and prayers as this trial begins.